What happens when a young female entrepreneur is confronted with provocative questions on live television? Elena Carter never expected that her interview on Morning Inside would turn into a tense showdown between her and the renowned host, Victoria Hayes. Elena is far from an ordinary entrepreneur. At just 30, she built a business empire from scratch and founded a program dedicated to helping young women launch their own ventures. Growing up in a struggling neighborhood in New York City, she understands firsthand the barriers many face when trying to change their lives. So when she accepted the invitation to appear on this prestigious talk show, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to spread her message. However, Victoria Hayes is no easy opponent. Known for her sharp wit and cutting sarcasm, she has a reputation for pushing her guests to their limits, often digging into controversial topics to stir up drama. Still, Elena remained confident. She had overcome far greater challenges. But as she stepped into the studio, she had no idea just how far Victoria would take the conversation. Could Elena hold her ground against the relentless questioning? How would she respond when put on the spot? And most importantly, who would truly take control of the conversation? The studio lights beamed brightly, illuminating the stage as the audience watched the conversation unfold. At first, Victoria Hayes appeared warm and welcoming, flashing a polished smile as she introduced Elena Carter with the usual pleasantries. But Elena quickly sensed that this was merely a facade. After a few minutes discussing her entrepreneurial journey, Victoria leaned forward slightly, her eyes gleaming with a calculated intensity, tilting her head just enough to signal a shift in tone. She posed the first real challenge. Elena, do you really think programs like yours are necessary? Isn't it possible that they exist simply because people don't try hard enough? The air in the studio grew heavy. Some audience members stiffened, while others exchanged hushed whispers. This wasn't just a question, it was a veiled attack. The implication was clear. Victoria was suggesting that those who sought Elena's program were simply not putting in enough effort. That instead of working harder, they relied on external help. But Elena didn't flinch. She recognized this tactic all too well, turning support into charity. Reframing effort as an excuse. Taking a steady breath, she maintained her confident smile and responded with a poised yet razor-sharp tone. Victoria, I believe hard work is crucial. But if hard work alone guaranteed success, the world would have been fair a long time ago. A wave of applause rippled through the audience. Encouraged, Elena continued, my program isn't about giving away anything for free. It's about breaking down the barriers that so many in my community face. Imagine a race where some people have chains tied around their ankles. Can you really say that everyone has the same opportunity to win? Or is the fairest thing to do helping them remove those chains? Victoria pressed her lips together, still holding onto her composed but icy smile. An interesting analogy, she remarked, her voice smooth but laced with subtle challenge. But isn't it sometimes just a matter of people choosing to stop focusing on obstacles and start working harder? Elena wasn't surprised. She knew Victoria wouldn't back down so easily. But she hadn't come here to play defense. Locking eyes with the host, she prepared to deliver a response that would leave the entire studio in deep contemplation. Victoria didn't back down. She shifted in her seat, leaning back with her fingers interlaced, as if carefully weighing Elena's response. A brief silence passed before she spoke again, her voice calm but laced with unmistakable challenge. I understand your perspective, Elena, but have you ever considered that by constantly discussing barriers and differences, we might actually be creating division? Shouldn't we focus on unity, on what brings us together, rather than emphasizing who has it harder? Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged uncertain glances. This was a familiar argument. The notion that talking about inequality only prolongs it. Subtly, Victoria was steering the conversation in a way that framed Elena's work as divisive rather than unifying. But Elena wasn't so easily trapped. Tilting her head slightly, she let a small, knowing smile play on her lips before responding. Her voice composed yet razor-sharp. Unity is a beautiful thing, Victoria, but how do we build a bridge if we ignore the river that separates us? For a moment, the studio fell silent. Then, a wave of applause broke out. Elena's eyes gleamed with conviction as she continued. True unity doesn't mean pretending everyone starts from the same place. It means acknowledging that some people are forced to begin far behind the starting line, and making the effort to pull them forward so we can all move together. Victoria's smile remained, but there was a flicker of tension in her gaze. Elena's response hadn't just countered her argument, it had exposed its flaw. Still, Victoria wasn't ready to concede. Raising an eyebrow in feigned curiosity, she pressed on. "You're very eloquent, Elena, but I have to ask, your program specifically supports young women entrepreneurs. Why not open it to everyone who dreams of starting a business? Isn't that, in itself, a form of favoritism?" Elena had been expecting this. She had heard this question countless times before. Meeting Victoria's gaze head-on, she answered without hesitation. "It's not favoritism, Victoria. It's intentionality. If a roof is leaking, we don't repair the entire building, we start by fixing the leak. And when we do that, the whole house becomes better for everyone." The audience erupted in applause. Louder this time. Elena had once again flipped the narrative in her favor. And she could sense it. Victoria was beginning to lose her grip on the conversation. But this wasn't the climax just yet. Elena knew Victoria had one final card left to play. Victoria adjusted her posture, crossing her legs and tilting her head slightly. Her sharp gaze locked onto Elena like a predator sizing up its prey. She knew Elena had delivered 2 strong rebuttals. But now, she was preparing her final move, one that could put Elena on the defensive. "I understand your desire to help," Victoria said, her tone saccharine yet laced with provocation. "But let's be honest, when a program is designed exclusively for one specific group, is that truly fair? Some might say that this is just another form of discrimination, only in a different direction." The tension in the studio thickened. Some audience members exchanged confused glances. Others nodded in agreement. This was a classic tactic, reframing support for marginalized groups as reverse discrimination. A dangerous argument that, if left unchecked, could shift public perception against Elena. Elena remained composed, but this time, she leaned forward slightly. Her eyes no longer just radiated confidence, they carried a warning. She knew she had to dismantle Victoria's argument decisively. Not only to defend her position but to shut down this manipulative narrative once and for all. "Victoria," Elena began, her voice measured and deliberate. "Discrimination is when you intentionally deny someone access to an opportunity they should have had. What I'm doing, I'm creating opportunities that never existed before. That's not exclusion, that's correction." A murmur spread through the crowd, followed by a wave of nodding. Encouraged, Elena pressed on, her tone strengthening without losing its calm edge. "Let me give you a simple example. If a child is falling behind in class, we don't slow down the entire class to be fair. We give that child extra support so they can catch up. And when they succeed, the whole class benefits." This time, the applause wasn't just loud, it was sustained. Elena held Victoria's gaze, watching for a reaction. Victoria forced a small smile, but it lacked the effortless charm she had displayed earlier. She cast a quick glance toward the producers behind the cameras. She knew the debate was slipping out of her control. "Interesting," Victoria mused, though her voice now carried a subtle strain. "But some might argue that programs like yours make people reliant on help rather than teaching them to stand on their own. How do you respond to those who say you're encouraging dependency rather than independence?" Victoria believed this was the question that would finally corner Elena. What she didn't realize was that Elena had been waiting for this exact moment. And this time, her response wouldn't just earn applause, it would leave the audience thinking more deeply than ever before. Victoria crossed her legs, tapping her fingers lightly on the table, her eyes gleaming with a hint of triumph. She knew she had just thrown out a question that could shift the momentum, if not to corner Elena, then at least to put her in a difficult position. "I'm simply playing the role of someone trying to understand the issue," Victoria said smoothly, her voice sharp yet deceptively neutral. "Do you truly believe that programs like yours are fair? After all, many people face hardships, not just young women. So why focus solely on one group? Is that really fairness?" The audience stirred. Some nodded as if Victoria had just posed the obvious. This was a classic debate tactic, turning targeted support into something that seemed like favoritism. But Elena didn't waver. She had been waiting for this exact question. Taking a deep breath, she let a composed yet piercing smile spread across her face before responding with calm authority. Victoria, fairness doesn't mean treating everyone exactly the same. Fairness means ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. The first wave of applause rippled through the crowd. But Elena wasn't finished. Leaning in slightly, her eyes burned with conviction. Imagine a neighborhood on fire. The firefighters arrive, but instead of putting out the flames where they're needed most, they spray water on every house equally. That wouldn't make sense, would it? We focus on the burning houses first, because if we don't, the whole neighborhood will suffer. The studio erupted. Cheers. Applause. Even a few people rising from their seats. Elena had struck at the heart of the issue with a crystal-clear analogy. Victoria's smile flickered. She cleared her throat, attempting to regain her footing. I understand your metaphor, she said, but let me ask you this. If we keep focusing on differences, does that really bring us closer together? Wouldn't it be better to emphasize what unites us rather than what sets us apart? Elena didn't hesitate for a second. Her response was immediate and unwavering. Victoria, you can't build a bridge by pretending the river isn't there. We have to acknowledge the gaps before we can close them. This time, the reaction wasn't just applause, it was thunderous. Some audience members whistled in approval. Others clapped so hard it echoed through the studio. Elena saw the slightest flicker of uncertainty in Victoria's eyes. But the host wasn't ready to admit defeat just yet. With a subtle smirk, Victoria tilted her head, pretending to ponder something deeply before delivering what she believed was her final knockout question. But Elena, don't you think that by constantly talking about inequality, we're actually prolonging it? Isn't it possible that you, through your program, are unintentionally creating a new kind of division? A heavy silence hung over the studio. The audience, the cameras, even the crew, everyone was waiting. But Elena? She simply smiled, because she knew this was the moment to deliver her most powerful response yet. Victoria's question cut through the air like a sharp blade, designed to pierce the very foundation of Elena's argument. The studio fell into a hushed anticipation, with some audience members holding their breath, waiting to see how the young entrepreneur would respond. But Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look rattled or defensive. Instead, she smiled, a slow, knowing smile, as if she had seen this move coming all along. Leaning forward slightly, her gaze unwavering, she spoke in a voice that was firm yet composed. Victoria, let me ask you something. When a firefighter puts out a burning house, does anyone stand there and demand, why aren't you spraying water on all the other houses? Even the ones that aren't on fire? Silence. The question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Every word landed like a well-aimed strike, cutting through the noise and leaving nothing but raw truth. For the first time, there was no murmuring, no quiet debates among the audience. There was only stillness, people absorbing the weight of Elena's words. And then, she pressed on, her voice gaining strength. Because people understand that when a house is on fire, we don't waste resources on homes that are safe. We focus on the ones in danger first. And when that fire is put out, the entire neighborhood is safer. That's not favoritism, Victoria. That's how we solve problems effectively. The applause started as a ripple, then erupted into a tidal wave. Some audience members leapt to their feet, cheering. Others whistled. Even a few crew members standing behind the cameras exchanged looks of quiet admiration. Victoria, always in control, suddenly found herself at a loss. Her lips parted slightly as if to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire interview, Victoria Hayes had nothing to say. Elena wasn't done. She knew this was the defining moment. And one more thing, she continued, her voice carrying a quiet yet undeniable power. We cannot pretend inequality doesn't exist just because acknowledging it makes some people uncomfortable. If fighting for fairness unsettles someone, maybe, just maybe, that discomfort is exactly what they need to face. This time, the applause didn't just return, it thundered. Audience members shouted her name, some clapping so hard their hands must have stung. The energy in the room was undeniable. Victoria sat still, her signature composed expression faltering just slightly. She quickly regained her professionalism, clearing her throat in an attempt to steady herself. Well, Elena, she said, forcing a small smile, it seems you have quite a few supporters here today. Elena tilted her head slightly, her confidence unwavering. And that's because, Victoria, the truth has a weight of its own. The studio erupted. Cheers. Applause. And voices calling her name filled the room. Even those who had previously questioned her now seemed captivated. Victoria knew this debate was over, and she hadn't won. The interview ended, but its impact did not. The moment Morning Insight cut to black, social media exploded. Clips of Elena Carter's razor-sharp responses flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, racking up millions of views within hours. The hashtags #ElenaCarter and #TruthHasWeight dominated every platform. Her supporters weren't just young women, they included entrepreneurs, activists, and countless individuals who had fought to rise above adversity. But not everyone was on her side. Some critics called her too aggressive, too harsh. But Elena understood one simple truth. Their discomfort wasn't about how she spoke, it was about what she had dared to say. That night, in her hotel room overlooking the dazzling lights of New York City, her phone buzzed non-stop with messages. Congratulations, thank yous, even partnership offers from major organizations. Yet, out of all the messages, one stood out, a simple text from a young woman. Thank you, you said what I've never dared to say. Today, I feel stronger. Elena smiled. She knew the fight for fairness was far from over. But today, she had taken a step forward. And, more importantly, she had inspired others to do the same.